A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Second, The Golden Thread, Chapter 16, Still Knitting. Madame Defarge and Monsieur her husband returned amicably to the bosom of Saint Antoine, while a speck in a blue cap toiled through the darkness and through the dust, and down the weary miles of avenue by the wayside, slowly tending toward that point of the compass where the chateau of Monsieur the Marquis, now in his grave, listened to the whispering trees. Such ample leisure had the stone faces now for listening to the trees and to the fountain, that the few village scarecrows who, in their quest for herbs to eat and fragments of dead stick to burn, strayed within sight of the great stone courtyard and terrace staircase, had it borne upon their starved fancy that the expression of the faces was altered. A rumor just lived in the village, had a faint and bare existence there, as its people had, and when the knife struck home, the faces changed from faces of pride to faces of anger and pain also, that when that dangling figure was hauled up 40 feet above the fountain, they changed again, and bore a cruel look of being avenged, and when they would henceforth bear forever. In the stone face over the great window of the bedchamber where the murder was done, 2 fine dints were pointed out in the sculptured nose, which everybody recognized, and which nobody had seen of old. And on the scarce occasions when 2 or 3 ragged peasants emerged from a crowd to take a hurried peep at Monsieur the Marquis petrified, a skinny figure would not have pointed to it for a minute before they all started away among the moss and leaves, like the more fortunate hares who could find a living there. Chateau and hut, stone face and dangling figure, the red stain on the stone floor, and the pure water in the village well, thousands of acres of land, a whole province of France, all France itself lay under the night sky, concentrated into a faint hair-breadth line. So does a whole world, with all its greatness and littleness, lie in a twinkling star, and as mere human knowledge can split a ray of light and analyze the manner of its composition, so sublimer intelligences may read in the feeble shining of this earth of ours every thought and act, every vice and virtue of every responsible creature on it. The Defarges, husband and wife, came lumbering under the starlight in their public vehicle to the gate of Paris, whereunto their journey naturally tended. There was the usual stoppage at the barrier guard-house, and the usual lanterns came glancing forth for the usual examination and inquiry. Monsieur Defarge alighted, knowing 1 or 2 of the soldierly there, and 1 of the police. The lantern he was intimate with, and affectionately embraced. When Saint Antoine had again enfolded the Defarges in his dusky wings, and they, having finally alighted near the saint's boundaries, were picking their way on foot through the black mud and offal of his streets, Madame Defarge spoke to her husband. "Say then, my friend, what did Jacques of the police tell thee?" "Very little tonight, but all he knows. There is another spy commissioned for our quarter. There may be many more, for all that he can say, but he knows of one." "Ah, well," said Madame Defarge, raising her eyebrows with a cool business air. "Is it necessary to register him? How do you call that man?" "He is English." "So much better. His name?" "Barsad," said Defarge, making it French by pronunciation. But he had been so careful to get it accurately that he then spelt it with a perfect correctness. "Barsad," repeated Madame. "Good. Christian name?" "John Barsad," repeated Madame, again murmuring at once to herself. "Good. His apprentice, is it known? His appearance, is it known? Age, about 40 years. Height, about 5 feet 9. Black hair, complexion dark, generally rather handsome. Visage, eyes dark, face thin, long, and sallow. Nose aquiline, but not straight, having a peculiar inclination toward the left cheek, expression, therefore, sinister. My faith, is it a portrait? Said Madame, laughing. He shall be registered tomorrow. They turned into the wine-shop, which was closed, for it was midnight, and when Madame Defarge immediately took her post at her desk, counted the small moneys that had been taken during her absence, examined the stock, went through the entries in the book, made other entries of her own, checked the serving man in every possible way, and finally dismissed him to bed. Then she turned out the contents of the bowl of money for the second time and began knotting them up in her handkerchief in a chain of separate knots, for safe keeping through the night. All this while Defarge, with his pipe in his mouth, walked up and down, complacently admiring, but never interfering, in which condition, indeed, as to the business and his domestic affairs, he walked up and down through life. The night was hot, and the shop, closed shut and surrounded by so foul a neighbourhood, was ill-smelling. Monsieur Defarge's olfactory sense was by no means delicate, but the stock of wine smelt much stronger than it had ever tasted, and so did the stock of rum and brandy and aniseed. He whiffed the compound of scents away as he put down his smoked-out pipe. "You are fatigued," said Madame, raising her glass as she nodded the money. "There are only the usual odours." "I am a little tired," her husband acknowledged. "You are a little depressed, too," said Madame, whose quick eyes had never been so intent on the accounts, but they had a ray or two for him. "Oh, the men, the men!" "But, my dear—" began Defarge. "But, my dear," repeated Madame, nodding firmly. "But, my dear, you are faint of heart tonight, my dear." "Well, then," said Defarge, as if a thought were wrung out of his breast, "it is a long time." "It is a long time," repeated his wife. "And when it is not a long time, vengeance and retribution require a long time. It is the rule." "It does take a long time to strike a man with lightning," said Defarge. "How long?" demanded Madame composedly. "Does it take to make and store lightning? Tell me." Defarge raised his forehead thoughtfully, as if there were something in that, too. "It does not take a long time," said Madame, "for an earthquake to swallow a town." Well, tell me how long it takes to prepare the earthquake." "A long time, I suppose," said Defarge. "But when it is ready, it takes place and grinds to pieces everything before it. In the meantime, it is always preparing, though it is not seen or heard. That is your consolation. Keep it." She tied a knot with flashing eyes, as if it throttled a foe. "I tell thee," said Madame, extending her right hand for emphasis, "that although it is a long time on the road, it is on the road and coming. I tell thee it never retreats, it never stops. I tell thee it is always advancing. Look around and consider the lives of all the world that we know. Consider the faces of all the world that we know. Consider the rage and discontent in which the Jacquerie addresses itself. With more and more certainty every hour. Can such things last? Bah! I mock you." "My brave wife," returned Defarge, standing beside her with his head a little bent, and his hands clasped at his back, like a docile and attentive pupil before his catechist. "I do not question all this, but it has lasted a long time. It is possible, you know well, my wife, it is possible that it may not come during our lives." Well, how then?" demanded Madame, tying another knot, as if there were another enemy strangled. "Well," said Defarge, with a half-complaining and half-apologetic shrug, we shall not see the triumph." "We shall have helped it," returned Madame, with her extended hand in strong action. "Nothing that we do is done in vain, I believe, with all my soul, that we shall see the triumph. But even if not, even if I knew certainly not, show me the neck of an aristocrat and tyrant, and still I would—" There, Madame, with her teeth set, tied a very terrible knot indeed. "Hold!" cried Defarge, reddening a little as if he felt charged with cowardice. "I too, my dear, will stop at nothing." "Yes, But your weakness that you sometimes need to see your victim and your opportunities to sustain yourself without that, when the time comes, let loose a tiger and a devil. But wait for the time when the tiger and the devil chained, not shown, yet always ready. Madame reinforced the conclusion of this piece of advice by striking her little counter with her chain of money, as if she knocked its brains out, and then, gathering the heavy handkerchief under her arm in a severe manner, and observing that it was time to go to bed. And we will pause there.